Welcome everyone once again to the Cyber Talk with InfosecTrain, and to all our viewers and learners, have a wonderful day. To all our security enthusiasts, we're very excited to bring something very interesting in the world of cybersecurity with someone who has been breaking the barriers. When I say breaking the barriers, she really mean to be the person who have done great in the field, setting the standards in our industries. When I say in our industries, it's related to everything, to cybersecurity, to compliance, and to other all techie parts. I am Anas, and I couldn't be more thrilled to welcome Miss Vandana Verma. She's being very known to the people in the field of security and applications. For those who don't know, Vandana comes with security powerhouse. I mean, when we say that, she brings a lot of knowledge and information to impart a lot of things. Who transforms how organizations approach application security and DevSecOps. She's not just a practitioner; she's visionary who helped countless organizations to build security first culture, which is really important part we're going to discuss today as well. While keeping the pace, she rapidly also helped develop the cycles of security. From her groundbreaking works in supply chain, also in practical approach of DevSecOps, Vandana on board you today on a very insightful discussions. We would love to have a few words from you, and then we can dive into that.
Thank you so much, Anas. I'm really, really glad to be part of the show, and I've seen the audience. They really stick to the content, and I hope I can make some sense and share my insights around the topic, whether it's supply chain security, application security, or architecture. So, thank you so much for inviting me.
That's very interesting. Today, just not a discussion we're going to have. We will learn a lot about the real life cases examples. You may have seen how Netflix responses. You may have seen how Google Map responses. These all have a layer of security as well in application security, depth of implementation, strategies, supply chain architecture, security controls, automations, advanced security challenges, and outlook of future. When we talk about outlook of futures, how can we miss about AI? Yes, Vandana is going to give a light on AI as well. We will love from her today. With this, let's deep dive into the first topic, which we're going to discuss today. This is based on application security architect, which is very commonly in our these days. So let's analyze the evolution of, application security architect, Vandana, to understand how or you have made things that threat modeling methodology adapts to modern distribution systems, because that's what we want to know something from you.
Right. So, when we talk about application security architectures, they have been closely tied with the changes in technologies and the way we develop our software practices.
Okay.
And earlier the software used to be very simple. Okay, this is how the architecture, we'll have a client, we'll have a server, we will try to distribute things. But now, as systems have evolved, the whole system is in application security has also taken a different shape, where it's become more complex and distributed. Traditional security models have had to adopt to the new changes, new challenges, or even landscapes. So when we talk about traditional security architecture, they were centered around a perimeter defense, because everything was in house, everything was within the four walls of an organization. Even when we say a few years back, we were only doing work from office, but now things have changed. Now, while we talk about this perimeter defense, and when we talk, another point is where we focus on securing the boundaries of the network. So, threat modeling methodologies in that era typically had identifying security entry and exit point of the network.
Hmm.
Often, we were just relying on the firewall rules or IDS, IPS, or perimeter defense mechanisms, like
Right.
everything around that. Even I remember that there were some servers which were very old, so we had to actually put proactive controls. That was
Okay.
part of threat modeling, that figure out what we can do and what we cannot do, because there
Mhm.
are some systems which we cannot patch at all.
Right.
Now, fast forward, with the adoption of the service oriented architectures, applications even began to decompose to services that communicated over a network.
Okay.
So, when this shift happened, it actually made us thought that let's reevaluate threat modeling to include the threats that could happen because of service interactions, data flows between different services that we have. Now we are talking about different models. So there were different models that came into picture, and one of the models which is very, very or very, very big or being in use is stride.
Okay.
Now, is stride. So stride is spoofing, tempering, repudiation,
Right.
information disclosure, denial of service, evaluation of privilege. So stride model became to be used more extensively to evaluate each service. Now this is not the only model, let me be honest. So there are multiple models which are there, stride, pasta, this and that, but this one is something which kept along for many organizations, and I
Uh-huh.
still see that they are using it.
Okay.
But now we started using threat modeling from the traditional ecosystem. Now we had to adopt to microservices and cloud-based architecture because everyone wants to move to cloud, and they want to talk about it. So as organization moved to microservices and adopted this cloud-based infrastructure, the complexity of security model even increased. So
Okay.
application became more distributed across multiple services, multiple environments, even multiple cloud providers, even geographic locations. So you can imagine that how critical that became. So for threat modeling, what I saw was that we were creating data flow diagrams. So we updated the data flow diagrams, which are very simple to reflect microservices architectures, so that we can show that how data moves between different services and independently.
Right.
And we started creating attack trees, that where things can go wrong. So we expanded to consider the cloud specific threats as well, whether it could be misconfigured storage buckets, which are especially in case of Amazon S3 buckets, compromised cloud service credentials. Because now we are talking about passwords, right? We are
Right.
not, we shouldn't share passwords, we should have long passwords. But back then I remember, we actually worked on one of the projects where we were given that you have to actually map proper security controls, you have to threat model. And we realized back then people were using 6-digit password for their cloud accounts.
Okay.
Imagine 6-digit passcode, and if somebody gets to know, they can play around with your whole environment. So
Hmm.
we have to change everything. Then it became a requirement that you have to have this big password, you need to have a special characters, and you need to have numbers, you shouldn't use your name, recurring characters, and multiple aspects, right? So people
Right.
started treating passwords as toothbrushes, where why should we share passwords?
Correct.
And I so it took us 6 months to map all of the things, where we actually had multiple accounts, over 200 accounts. We had to change the passwords, put it in a vault so that people can only retrieve when there is a real need. Gave them the service accounts, gave them the accounts. So
Hmm.
it was something which was very, very intriguing. But yeah, that used to happen. And now when we talk about DevSecOps practices, or these new practices, the threat modeling became integral part of the development life cycle, and we are talking about it that we should have threat modeling in this modern distributed system.
Absolutely true. Very interesting. And the example you have given about those passwords, I think that plays a vital role to understand this. That these days, I think people need to be more proactively looking for these things as well. That's absolutely true. But there's one more thing that just comes sublime of this that we call about API gateways. And I'm very sure that you must have taken few technical approach in securing API gateways in multi-cloud environments while identifying the federations. So that we're very sure. We would love to know if some real life example, something will let us know about that as well.
So when we talk about security API gateways, especially when we talk about multi-cloud environment, or
Right.
when managing those federation or authentication, there's another comprehensive approach that we need to follow, because
Okay.
it needs to have proper policy set that how we're going to be managing these APIs.
Okay.
If one API is exposed to the external factors, we are in a big trouble. And
Right.
that's why, see, for identity federation, there are multiple practices being followed in organization. Whether
Mhm.
they're using OAuth 2, they're using OpenID Connect, because these are now the de facto standards for securing authorization and authentication. So OAuth 2 provides delegated authorization to services in a very secure way, while
Okay.
OpenID Connect builds an OAuth 2.0 to add authentication layer to it. So this ensures that the authentication is done, or only authenticated users can access the resources. Um, Another thing when we talk about securing API gateways, now JOT tokens or JSON web tokens are being used.
Yeah.
So we utilize these JOT tokens. They securely transmit information between parties which are using JSON objects. This can be used to assert claims between the identity provider and API gateway. So I really like the JOT tokens way of using for API gateways.
Okay.
The- Within organizations, we are using single sign-on. Like there are multiple applications, and we are using simple single sign-on for our applications. And then on top of it, we have multi-factor authentication, whether
Mm.
using Okta or any other authentication mechanism. So single sign-on is, I think, something which is very, very interesting, and I totally like it because we have because this actually removes the overhead of using these multiple passwords. For
Right.
me, trust me, I am a person who does not remember. I can remember names, faces, but when it comes to passwords, because they're so complex now, so many now, I think I
Right.
forget. So I think this single sign-on really, really helps. So I feel that uh, these using these identity mechanisms really help. And on top of it, we can have some security policies, like how do you configure gateways to enforce security policies, whether it will be rate limiting, IP whitelisting, or deep packet inspection, so that we don't have this denial of service or distributed denial of services from multiple ecosystems. That's what attackers are trying to do. Um, Another thing is, for security API gateways, we can have a secure mechanism, a secure channel, that is TLS. So all data that is passing through, transmitting through API gateways is encrypted through TLS mechanism, to avoid any tampering or interception. So
Okay.
we use these gateways, API gateways, so that we have advanced threat protection, and that's why we need to have proper schema validation or attack detection mechanism. But see, these are the few things that I we can do. But then there are tons of things around network also we can do. But whether it's network segmentation, compliance check, auditing, and then we can automate this whole thing. Like especially in cloud, we have infrastructure as a code, so we can completely automate those things.
I mean, that's very interesting. There's one more thing which people need to understand the way Vandana has said about the identity federation is a even a very simple language to the viewers who are looking this for the first time. It's a system of trust between two parties. I mean, that's how we shift the resource or access. So that was very interesting to all the viewers who have understand about this topic. Uh, but when this comes, there's also a thing which we call about that is control, or you can say containerized applications. Also, the orchestrations of the flexibility. So, how do you architect security controls of these two elements with the compromising, not with orchestration flexibility? But because we have seen there's have been tools in market being used for the containerized applications like Docker or Kubernetes, but we wanted to learn it in a very simple way where people can connect in the real life basis to know how really this works out.
So when we talk about containerized environments, the first thing to remember is that when we are using these images, we should download it from the known sources or from the well-known sources. Why I'm saying that? Because we have our applications built completely in these containerized environment. It's like for people who are hearing for the first time, it's like a box which has everything to run an application. So when
Okay.
there is a box, it runs the whole application. It needs to have secure content. Or what
Okay.
will happen? Think of a situation where you are downloading an image which has a malware embedded to it or which is misconfigured, and you're using it. Now, what will you do? You will discard that container and create a new container if some issue happens. But
Okay.
if you're running a heavy application or something which is very critical, you cannot just go ahead and discard it.
Mhm.
So you cannot have application which is vulnerable from the get-go itself. What are you
Okay.
going to do is, you need to actually remember that I cannot have something which is vulnerable. So I'm going
Right.
to be using it from the known sources, or and within our environment, what we started using, that have a place, have a repository which has images, container images which are scanned, which
Hmm.
are already tested for security issues. There will be changes, there will be updates on those images, but then at least for the first go, Yes, they are. So they are downloaded from internal repositories itself, or internal database, or internal environment itself. So I feel that to best architect is that first have images from the internal sources. If you are using third party dependencies, third party tools or vendors as part of the ecosystem, have a list of it. Create proper bill of materials that what I am using in my environment. Especially
Hmm.
for supply chain security, we call it as software bill of materials, where what do we have in our softwares? Because if you don't know what you have in your house, you will never be able to fix something. If some, or you will not be able to patch something or fix something if something goes wrong. So
Correct.
maintain that list of it, or you will always be in trouble. So
And
so I think that way we can fix it. But yes, they then do not give root permissions, do not give privilege access to anyone and
correct.
everyone. If container does not need to give access to you and me both, why would we be given access? I've seen cases where this is not a container example, but an environment access wherein I'm a security person. Do I
Uh-huh.
need to have access to the complete ecosystem? No. The developer need to have have access to the development environment, not production. So those segregated access has to be maintained, or whatever security controls we would put in, we will always be in trouble. We'll have exposure to the different kind of risks which are there. So the main point is that let's understand what we are going to be putting in that environment, and
Okay.
then move on, then architect.
That's very sounds interesting. I mean, this is something very basic which everyone has to take care of it. First, you have to refine the data, and then you have to use your refined information to build something. Otherwise, if later something happened to you, you just have to do the entire process once again. Very basics which need to be followed. It's interesting. Okay, but now let's just dive into about the DevSec implementation, because we have had a lot about that from you in many places, and we have been doing that. So, when we talk about that, there's one thing which we cannot forget, that is CIDI, which we usually call continuous integration and continuous deployment. So, what's your methodology for integrating the security testing in CIDI pipelines while managing these false positive at scales at your level? Because we want to learn something from you in that point of view.
Right. So when we are integrating security testing into the CI/CD pipeline, which is continuous integration and continuous development pipeline, we need to manage multiple things. First of
Okay.
all, we need to have automated security testing tools, whether it's a static application security testing tool. Now, for anyone who's new to static application security testing tool, um, specifically, it's running security scans on your code that you
Okay.
have written.
Right.
Then there are third party dependencies, third party code, which is there. So for that, you can use SCA, which is software composition analysis tools.
Okay.
Um, then DAST, which is dynamic application security testing tool. Now, while I say these multiple tools or technologies in your environment, the most important thing is that first you write your code. So
Uh-huh.
that code needs to be tested. Then you embed third party code to it. That also needs to be tested. Now, when an application is ready, so that when it looks like, oh, it's ready to go to the production, it's not a
Okay.
code anymore but integrated into the environments, then you need to do the dynamic application security testing. So DAST. Now there are multiple other things that have come up, like IAST, which is interactive application security testing. Then there are multiple other terminologies which you keep hearing here, but I think these are the main ones that you should actually look at it. And these tools, technologies run at different stages of development processes to catch vulnerabilities or to catch issues which can actually impact an application. Because as early as you find the tools uh,
Uh-huh.
or um, or issues in your pipeline, you'll be able to fix them early, as well as you'll reduce the cost to fix at the later time. So I think when you're using tools, that's for first go. Then you need to set the threshold or baselines that, okay, if we have a critical vulnerability in the code, the
Uh-huh.
pipeline should fail, because we need
Okay.
to fix the critical vulnerability first. Because if it's a critical vulnerability and it's not fixed, it will be a big trouble for our organization. And we have seen a lot of breaches because of those issues that we have. accepted the risks or did not fix the critical bugs, and it became a big problem. Now, not all issues should break the build, or it'll be like security is a blocker. So that should never happen. So we
Mhm.
need to prioritize based on the risk they pose to our application, because it could be a critical vulnerability, but our application is internal, so it might not be as critical as it's for anyone else. It could be a high or a medium severity. So we need to define the risks, and then once we define the risks, make sure we keep updating the security tools and the databases to detect new vulnerabilities. And
Okay.
if you're using third party dependencies, vendors, and they provide a patch, we need to have some mechanism that we update those dependencies as well. So there has to be a periodic review and fine tuning of the configuration for these tools to adapt as per our environment.
Sounds
um,
good.
then if you are doing everything right but you're not reporting it, it is
Right.
as good as not doing anything. And make sure these things are fixed. If risk acceptance needs to be done from different departments, that has to be done. Or if all the efforts that you've put in, it'll be waste.
True. So true. That's interesting. Uh, to all the viewers, I mean, the way Vandana has explained about all those things, I would like to add that the way she explained about the CIDI is very interesting. To the viewers who usually use Netflix, to them also, I would love to say that usually Netflix do CIDI pipelines to deploy hundreds of updates on day-to-day basis without interrupting the services as well, and that's how their automation service works in a very interesting way. And the way she said about the reporting, that's what they do in the right way to make their things track on a really correct way. That's interesting. Thank you for giving this live, Vandana. With this, there's another thing that law comes up with. Man, this is something which we cannot skip. Why? Because security policy as code, which is something which we really wanted to know from you, because you were the right person to let us know about under the infrastructure and configuration draft. So, how do you approach all this part? I mean, how do you approach security policy as a code, particularly regarding the infrastructure and configuration draft?
Sure. So policy as a code is something which is very, very important. And I feel which is picking up big time because it needs to be part of the whole ecosystem. And these secure policies as code can help in our automation as well. So how we can do it? First of all, my favorite part is when we talk about cloud is infrastructure as a code.
Okay.
So infrastructure as a code is something wherein there's a simple file that could be a Terraform file, CloudFormation file, or Ansible. So these are the technologies behind using infrastructure as a code scripts. So there you can define your whole infrastructure setup. So when you're spinning up your whole environment, you're actually defining everything in just one file.
True.
So this includes your configuration, which could be firewall rules, network configurations, access controls. So by defining these in a code, we are ensuring that they are applied consistently to everything. So everything
Mhm.
is been controlled. So we can actually use Terraforms to create a secure VPC configuration in AWS with all the traffic being blocked except for essential ports or that are
Okay.
needed. So this is something which is interesting. And another thing is that when you're having a sale, and there's a huge amount of load, like keep seeing these sales in India, right? So if the sales are there and there is huge traffic, you cannot just wait for the server to go down. It needs to
Right.
scale, right? So these Terraform scripts, with using these, you can actually scale your environment. And you can make sure that if the load goes up to this extent, the new environment needs to be spun up, new servers need to be spun up. So this can really help.
Okay.
Yeah, and another thing is that we can integrate these policy as code into CI/CD pipelines to automatically apply security policies whenever infrastructure is provisioned or updated. So
Hmm.
we can actually run Terraform apply to deploy changes, but only after automated security check approves those changes. So we can automate that. And then there are tools like Open Policy Agent, which is OPA, that can be used to enforce security policies dynamically. So this OPA integrates with Kubernetes, Terraform, and other cloud native tools to enforce policies at the runtime environments. So OPA's policies prevent the creation of public S3 buckets, or enforcing minimum TLS version or load balances. So I feel that these policies as code is something which is enabling us to do even more, because we cannot just stick to something which is vulnerable. We can even think beyond it, that yes, we are using this policy and it will secure our environment. But remember one thing: when you're using these terraforms, you need to be very very careful, or you'll be spinning the environments which are vulnerable. So
Right.
this is important. Then we can actually have automated remediation as well, wherein there are some self-healing scripts that we can apply,
Right.
or we can actually have some kind of configuration which can correct itself, like a scheduled job that runs Terraform apply to reset configurations to the desired state based on the
Mhm.
default code. So we can automate that as well. And then auditing and collaboration with different teams is something which definitely helps.
Sounds interesting. So we can say, while the way Vandana has explained about, if we are doing a shopping on any big billion day sale or something XYZ, Terraform plays a vital role there to let us buy our things. Next time, if you are doing a shopping, make sure you remember this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something, one of the things which really helps organization. But back in back in the stage where they might be using Ansible also, or maybe some other scripts, or maybe some built-in
Right.
in-house script. I think we would
Okay.
love to know from them. But yeah, that's something which is helping.
True. That's very true. Interesting. So with this, you just said a word while we were discussing about this Terraform, that infrastructure as a code environment. So now, if you have said this, let's understand your strategies of implementing an automated security controls with this infrastructure as a code environment. In a very short answer from you, we would love to know from you.
So when we say infrastructure as a code, there are multiple things that we can do.
Okay.
So let's understand that we can have pre-commit hooks, so we can automate our scanning. So we can
Okay.
use GitHub pre-commit hook to run
Okay.
tools like CheckCove or TFSec or Terraform files, which can identify issues with open source or open security groups or publicly accessible S3 buckets. Now it's
Okay.
specific to in IAC I'm talking about. Then we can do static code analysis, which is like, even though it's a one file that needs to be tested, correct?
Right.
So we can use Terraform Validate or Terraform Plan to detect potential security issues in Terraform configurations during the CI pipeline, CI/CD pipeline.
Okay.
Then we can use policy as code tools like OPAs,
Okay.
so OPA is something which I totally love, so I talk about it. But then I'm not promoting HashiCorp, but then HashiCorp is something which we can use to define and enforce custom policies tailored to the organization's security requirement.
Okay.
We can have automated policy enforcement in CI/CD pipeline, um, and we can have those post-deployment scans as well, which can detect if anything has gone wrong. But
Okay.
there are multiple things that can be done, like education for the people that those who are using these environments, as
Right.
well as um, who that the everything around it needs to be logged, because
Hmm.
if something goes wrong, that can be we can go back and test it. It's like I say that it's like a post-mortem where something is going wrong, and you can go back and check what has gone wrong. Because if you
Oh.
don't have right logging and monitoring, even OWASP.10 says from application standpoint that yes, logging and monitoring has to be there. Even that's specific to application, but from network perspective also, we have been using SIM solutions, which is security information and event management. Why?
Yes.
And I remember we are using it from ages, because we want to monitor everything. We want to log everything and figure out where things have gone wrong or might go wrong.
That's true. That's very interesting. Which really need to be the way you are said about the Sims as well. Why we are using, and that is the relative implementation on managing the data in the right way. Now, since you talk about this, let's move to supply chain architect, because now I think we are heading to that direction to understand from that part of view as well. With this, there's another thing which we really identify till now while having word with Vandana, that she loves automated dependency. She wanted to track everything, keep the data ready and everything. That is something which we focus. So we want to know that how do you implement automated dependency analysis while managing the transitivity of dependency risk?
See, automating dependencies analysis is very, very important for understanding the different aspects of our application. Now,
Okay.
that could be around security vulnerabilities, licensing issues, or incompatible software versions or outdated software versions. So,
Okay.
for dependency management tools, I work for Sneak, so I use Sneak a lot. But when I'm not using Sneak, because not everyone uses Sneak, I can use Maven or Gradle for Java. So
Okay.
these tools use XML or Kotlin scripts to define project dependencies, and can automatically handle these different transitive dependencies. Um, they can also check the version conflict or compatibility. Now,
Mhm.
Node.js is also something which is used big time. So npm for Node.js, um, pipe and pipenv for Python, and
Okay.
for CI/CD integration, I use automated scanning tools like dependency check. So OWASP dependency check is for anyone who wants to start off using these or scan the dependencies. I think dependency check is amazing because it's
Mhm.
open source. You can use it, and then Sneak I use because it's free for me, and
Mhm.
it's free for everyone to use. But yes, they have a commercial angle as well, which can be integrated to CI/CD pipeline. So
Okay.
these tools scans dependencies for known vulnerabilities and generate a report, and even we can break a build if there's a critical issue which is found. Um,
Okay.
then another thing is dependency auto updated or automation for updation, because I know there is a dependency which is outdated, but if I
Mhm.
don't automate and figure out that yes, it is outdated, I'm in trouble. So tools like, if you're using GitHub, then Dependabot is something which is amazing because it can actually create pull requests to update the dependencies. It actually highlights, oh, these are the dependencies which are outdated, and these are the patches given by the maintainers, so you should update them. And
Mhm.
um, this can help in keeping dependencies up to date and reduce the risk of outdated libraries in the supply chain, because supply chain is nothing but simple, where you are building a software and shipping that software to multiple organizations.
Okay.
And in the whole software supply chain, it could be a consumer, an organization, or it could be government agencies as well, or Fortune 500 companies as well. Now, I know that I am making it part of the CSAD pipeline, but the most important thing is that I need to audit these dependencies as well. So there
Okay.
are multiple tools which are there, which can be used around these to analyze the licenses, old dependencies, or for graph visualization. I love how some tools use graph visualization, like Maven dependency graph, or PyDep, or npm remote ls. So I think these are really good. And then when I want to set up, there are multiple things that I can do. I can actually set up tools in my GitHub itself, outdated issues that are part of my ecosystem. So I can define dependencies in my package.json, and it can run the whole check on that environment, or pom.xml, or based on the language, I can define everything in one file and then figure out the issues around it. I
Hmm.
think that's
Sounds
really it.
That's it. That's very interesting. I mean, the way you just let us know about this basic about doing it in a very right way and not understanding about the supply characteristic structures to all the viewers and how it really get impacted and why it is important to keep a track of all those things before the deployment of the real thing. Uh, that's true, but with this is we would love to know because I have seen you somewhere you were speaking about this back in time about the SAC that is called software composition analysis. So this is we want to know that what methodology of implementing SAC in modern deployment really workflows or in the workflows works in the right way. What's your approach in that? What's your point of view on that?
When we talk about using these software composition analysis tools or SCA tools, the main purpose is to identify the issues in the third party code,
Okay.
right? Which is part of third party dependencies. What developers or what anyone who is managing the app does is that if the app has some issues and there is something missing, they go to the internet, download it, and they forget about it. That I download it. So SCA tools help in figuring out what you have as part of your code, whether it's license, whether it's compliance, whether it's anything else. When you have this environment and you want to use the right SCA tool, first of all, understand what languages you're using,
Okay.
what kind of environment do we have, because based on that we can use the right SCA tool. There are
Right.
multiple SCA tools in the market now, so I wouldn't say that it is just one tool. So
Okay.
we need to focus on the security and integrate directly to the version control system, that tool.
Mhm.
Now, when I say version control system, it could be we are using GitHub, we are using Bitbucket, we are using Netlify. Our code is on these three repositories or any XYZ repository.
Okay.
Now we need to integrate that SCA tool with them so that I can get to know that this code is outdated and I need to fix it as early as possible.
Okay.
So from tool standpoint, I will use only dependency check name, because the other tools that I might say, those are all
Every viewers, the way Vandana said about it, it is just for the basic understanding, and it just we just wanted to bring it in such a way that it makes your regular day-to-day learnings or implementation easier. It's not here to just specifically put in something which need to be done, something which not need to be done. The way she has explained about that. True.
yeah. And software composition analysis can be actually put into the whole development pipeline, or the development environment. Now people are using the SCA tools with the IDE environment, which is integrated development environment. Like when you're writing code as part of your Visual Studio Code or IntelliJ, you're
Mhm.
actually adding the SCA tools as an extension to it, and then while
Okay.
you're writing the code, it's actually figuring out the issues. So when it's integrated into the IDE, you can just, while you're writing, you're figuring out issues and you're fixing it. So it helps a lot. Then
Okay.
we are actually using some pre-commit hooks to trigger scans or pull request or push request, if there is a vulnerability in a dependency. We can
Hmm.
also take it as part of the whole build pipeline. Like we can automate it as part of the build pipeline, that if there is a critical vulnerability, it detects and let us know that yes, this is an issue. It should not go to the production, or it should be fixed as early as possible. So these are some things, but then you can actually do multiple further things, like you can set the threshold for failing build, because when it's part of the pipeline, if there's a critical vulnerability, it will fail the build. What
Hmm.
failing the build means is that when your application will not go to the production,
Okay.
it will not go live. So it has to, we have to set or define the severity of the vulnerability, high, medium, low, define all those things. We need to blacklist and whitelist. So these dependencies, there could be some dependencies which you don't, or which you never want in your environment, so those should be completely disallowed from the projects. So
Hmm.
these policy management have to be there. And then uh, as I said earlier, if we are tracking all these things and if you're not fixing it, if you're not reporting it, it is as good as not finding it. So when we are embedding these SCA tools directly into the workflow, we need to make sure that we have this continuous awareness and management of these security and compliance risks. So it has to have those kind of awareness and education with the teams who are managing it.
True, that's very true. Let's back in time, a few days back, I was amazed when I didn't get to know that there is something which Vandana has been working in past days is related to a very basic example. Why? Because the way we used to get a movie ticket QR code scan, I mean that is related to signing and verification system. What
Yeah.
what we got to know. So we would love to know how do you architect or artifact about signing in and verification systems in distribution development environment.
See, when we talk about signing or verification systems, there are multiple tools, technologies that can be used. So first, I will start off with public key infrastructure, which is PKI, where we can use CAs, which are certificate authorities. Even on your browser, you will have a certificate authority. You will see that, okay, there's a lock symbol. When you go on your browser URL, there is a lock symbol, right?
Okay.
So when you click on that, it'll talk to you about the certificate that the application is using. So we can set up our own CA, which is certificate authority, or we can use a trusted third party CA to issue and manage the certificate used for signing the artifacts. So on your browser, you will CA authority has given the certificate.
Okay.
Another
Good.
thing is key management. So
Okay.
we can have a key management practice, which includes the use of hardware security modules or cloud-based security key management services to protect our private keys. Because we don't want our keys to be going to anywhere. It's like we have a house, we have the keys scattered it at multiple places. Anyone can come and pick up the keys and come into our house, because internal people also can be disgruntled. So we'll have to
Okay.
be very, very sure how we are using these private keys. We can
Mm.
define the and implement the signing policies, that who can sign the artifacts. We
Okay.
can define the role and responsibilities for developers, build engineers, or automation and systems, and even security people, that who would be the signing authority or for these artifacts. Then
Okay.
what can be signed? We know who can sign it, but now what needs to be signed? So specify the type. We can specify that what are the artifacts that needs to be signed, whether it's source code, binaries, containers, or
Mhm.
container images. So we need to define that.
Okay.
And now, who sign it, what needs to be signed, but how will you sign it? So there has
Okay.
to be process for signing, using different commands, parameters, or for that matter cryptographic tools that needs to be used. And
Mm.
now, while we talk about automation in the pipeline, so I think automated signing is something which is very key. So we need to configure the build servers to automatically sign these artifacts during the whole build process, using key management systems as per the key as per our PKI policies. And we can have these audit trails, that who used the key, what time they used the key, and when was it used. So we
Okay.
can use that as well. And then verification. Now you're using these as part of your integration, but then there has to be verified. Uh, so when we are deploying the pipelines, we verify signatures before deploying the artifacts for testing. Now, let me tell you an interesting case where we signed off on a specific code, that okay, these were the vulnerabilities, these are the vulnerabilities which have been fixed, and these are the risk acceptance for some vulnerabilities which will be fixed later. So
Okay.
X code which was signed. Now when anything that went to the production, the code went to the production, the code Y was sent to the production. Now
Okay.
when it went to the production, the same vulnerabilities was seen in the production.
Right.
We were like, okay, we told you that these are the issues, and why these vulnerabilities are again coming. They said no, we send the same code. But when we actually thoroughly investigated, so there are two environments, X and Y environment.
Okay.
They are look alike, but X was tested, the Y code was sent to the production. What was
Mm.
the explanation? That the code is look-alike, but the vulnerabilities were fixed on the X code, not Y code. So we need to be sure what we are sending into the production. So compliance check has to be done. There has to be now when we're talking about signing, specifically certificate expiry has to be done.
Right.
Like for how
Absolutely.
long certificate has to be there. There are
Exactly.
multiple tools that are there which can do these compliance checks, that when the
Hmm.
license is expiring, and we have to do.
The way you said about these security measures and their access as well. With this, let's jump to the next part. We wanted to know from you about the least privilege access. I mean, discuss the implementation of this least privilege access control in dynamic cloud environment, because we have heard about RBAC and EBAC as well. So just Chris, is for us to know. I mean, the from where we have just end the discussion to moving to the next part is about giving the people about the least privilege access. How we do that in day-to-day or basic understanding.
So when we talk about least privilege access, now we're talking about zero trust. It's very,
Right.
very fancy, let me tell you. And especially during pandemic, a lot of people were talking about it. I
Okay.
remember I wrote a lot of articles for IBM, because I was working for IBM back then, and we had some really, really amazing technology around it. So I wrote some articles around it, and attached multiple tools to it. So when we say least privilege access, this is not new. It has been
Okay.
there since we talked about that who should have access to what, right? Like
Right.
if let's say Anas has access to InfosecTrain account as an admin, Vandana is not supposed to have access to that. But
Correct.
suddenly Vandana has access to it, and that to admin access.
Okay.
Am I supposed to have? No. So if I don't need access to it, why am I given access to it?
Right.
Now, I'll share a personal example which happened a few years back, wherein I had someone in my team. So especially security team has most of the access that you can think of, because you do pen testing, you do cloud environment setup, application security setup, threat hunting, all of those things, and for that
True.
matter, red teaming as well. So now when you do all of this, your IPs are whitelisted, you are, or your ID is whitelisted, that you can do anything and everything. So this person from my team left the organization,
Okay.
surrendered the laptop, everything was there. Now everything is done. After 15 days, I get a ping on my internal system chat server saying,
Okay.
"Hi, how are you?" Now this person has left the organization, but this person's ID is still active.
Okay.
Now, leave the least privilege. This person was not supposed to actually have an access to the system. That
Right.
ID should have been disabled, not deleted, but disabled back then, which was a miss, a very, very big miss. Now, this
Okay.
person was kind enough to just log out, and then we disabled it. I think the very next minute we realized that this
Hmm.
has happened, and we changed the policies that as soon as someone leaves, the same day the ID needs to be disabled at 5 p.m. But yes,
Hmm.
think of, like, if you're not managing those identity control systems, what will
Exactly.
happen, right? So environment hardening has to be done. That even these are the simple case of identities, but then not just for identities, but for the different environments, for
Uh-huh.
different system setups, this has to be there. Or even for API, we were talking about APIs. Once the
Right.
job is done, the API can be disabled. Just in time access can be given to APIs as well. And
Right.
if an API is there, there is only stipulated function it is doing, why we are giving the privilege to the APIs. So if
Okay.
somebody gets access to the API, they can play around. This should not happen. Only certain amount of access should be given to that microservice, APIs, or any architecture. I think that really, really helps,
Very
because
important. Yeah.
yeah, and I
And
love the concept of it.
I,
It's a
I could have even imagined the nightmare you would have seen after getting the message of that guy who just left the organization and you realize that we need to reform the access management. This is very
wow.
interesting. That's how we need to learn about the implementation of new things.
Yeah. I think
So true.
this is key. But then, yes, absolutely, there are multiple other things that we can do, where we can have environment isolation, we
Mhm.
can have detection mechanisms, but then it's better safe to be sorry.
Right.
Yeah,
Because, yeah. Then you give opportunity to the main leaders to look up the things and take the correct decision instead of you just being giving a negotiation discussions over that point. That's very true.
yeah.
There's one more thing is there as far as I remember in the something I was reading about your blog or your post that you mentioned about the hybrid cloud architects,
Hmm.
which is based on service to service communication, which is a part of advanced cloud security challenges which we usually see. So, what's your approach to implementing secure service to service communications in hybrid cloud architect? Because when we talk about hybrid cloud architects, there's a lot of things which they store in their database relative to anything which we see. Yeah.
Right. See, in simple words, if I have to talk about hybrid cloud now, we are using multiple services which are actually talking to each other. We're
Okay.
using multiple clouds which are talking to each other. We're
Right.
using software as a service, which is based on a cloud, and then that again is talking to some other cloud, whether it's AWS, whether it's Azure, whether it's Google Cloud. So all of them are talking to each other in some way or the other. So this the first thing to make sure is that there is a secure communication.
Okay.
The very first thing, if we are setting up an environment, if there's no secure communication, then we are in a big trouble. So we need
Mm.
to encrypt all the data which is in transit, which is
Okay.
moving data. Rest, absolutely, that needs to be encrypted, but first thing to remember is that the data in transit has to be properly encrypted. Then we can have a service mesh. Now, what is a service mesh? It's a kind of an environment which actually can manage service to service communication securely and consistently across different environments which are there. And um, as you asked about access control, let's set up a proper access control, strong identity based authentication and authorization, so that we have proper um, information, proper communication with the environments. Now,
Okay.
while I talk about these hybrid environments, we talk about zero trust again in this. Why? Where we are not trusting anyone, but verifying everything. You cannot
Ab-
trust even the individual who's working for that organization. So
True.
that net segmentation and zoning has to be there.
Hmm.
Now, especially now we're talking about hybrid environment. So there'll be some data which will be on premises, which is in our buildings. Then there'll be some amount of data which will be on the cloud environment. So segmentation between on-prem and cloud environments, and the zones, so that we can have access controls, access points. If I'm supposed to only have access to my building, can I have access to other building? No, I should not have
Right.
access. So those kind of segmentation really helps. And even um, segmentation helps in actually in issues of wherein we are spreading the risks. Let's
Hmm.
say if an attacker has entered into a certain segment or certain zone, they will not be able to navigate to the next zone. We can
Right.
isolate that environment.
Right.
That's where segmentation really, really helps. And again, I would talk about monitoring and logging, because anything and everything that we do, let's monitor and log. Because
Hmm.
if we're logging and monitoring, it helps big time. It actually helps in defense mechanisms, or it can help in detecting and responding to the threats early on. We can have like set up in our AWS environment, or Azure environment, or maybe when we are saying on-prem and cloud, it could be cloud to cloud communication. It could be
Right.
cloud to multi-cloud speaking, right? So the basic things is secure communication, proper authorization and authentication. Segmentation is something which really helps.
That's true. That plays a vital role in that. Uh,
Yeah.
when one thing I would love to know from you, and because this is something which you can only let us know, we call about chaos engineering environment. To
Hmm.
all the viewers who are actually understanding, this is a scenario where we intentionally do testing by injecting failures, or you can say any flaws, to improve the resilience and reliability. Just like our parents used to do with us, they push a lot of books on our shoulders to go school and see how we can carry up those things or not. Something like that. We wanted to know your methodology for security testing in these environments.
So, when we say chaos engineering, as you said, it's a simple practice to test a system resilience
Yep.
by intentionally introducing different disturbances or issues, and observing that how system responds. System
Correct.
should not go down if somebody starts bombarding our system. And
Right.
every time I think about chaos engineering, it reminds me of something called Chaos Monkey, which was developed by Netflix. I think
Exactly.
amazing. I totally loved it. And it's very, very important that we identify the weaknesses before they even become significant in our production environment. So it's about
Correct.
the way I was saying, better safe to be than sorry. So this actually helps there. And from security standpoints, chaos engineering can also be specifically modified, used, or identifying security resilience, because it's not just that if system goes down, but it's if an attack happens, how would the
Hmm.
systems would respond to it. So I think that way there are multiple ways it can be used. And then um, the simple practices that it can help define the baseline security objectives. We can potentially identify the threats and vulnerabilities, that if, let's say, if we are disturbing our system, what vulnerabilities can arise, or if the system give access to the attackers. So we can have those plan experiments that mimic the potential attacks or failures, which are related to the vulnerabilities. Now, especially DDoS attacks, which is distributed denial of services, the attacks coming from multiple places, that can be something which we can mock, or compromise credentials. I think these are very, very common. We saw that issues with Colonial Pipeline, where compromised VPN credentials actually played a big role in that. So I think credentials are something which we cannot, uh, which we know that there are issues, but
Right.
then I think how we're dealing with is important.
What
We are
important?
dealing with so many passwords. I'm not sure how many places I'm using the same password. Or
Hmm.
for now, I am using my password manager to remember my password, and I don't need to remember, and I use some password which is like so huge that people will keep playing around with. Um,
Correct.
Then what can we do? We can actually automate security tests for chaos engineering, and we can actually iterate these things back to back. For example, we can gain the insights, this is wrong, we fix it, and then do it again, so that we can test the resilience. So chaos
Okay.
engineering observability is something which is picking up big time and which is key in our
Hmm.
advanced systems. I feel that they should be there.
That's interesting. With this, we are about to end our session very close to, but we cannot end a session, any discussion these days without discussing about the most famous person or the most famous technology across the globe these days. We are talking about and buzzing about AI and machine learning and their implementation and automation. With this, there's one more thing very important which we have seen in back in time when you were discussing a lot about that's called data poisoning, because this is very much important people to understand why it is so critical. The result we are getting these days from any AI tool or any type of machine learning tools, we are getting what we are actually looking for, and we believe on the data that this is something which is correct, this is something which is right. Imagine if back in time something like that happened where data poisoning is actually happening and the result coming the wrong way. So we wanted to know what's your approach in securing ML pipelines or AI pipeline regarding the model integrity and data poisoning.
See, when we talk about it, the first important thing to remember is what kind of model we are using as part of
Correct.
the pipeline or as part of the ecosystem. And that model, when you're using it, that needs to be up to date. It's not just you're using the AI/ML into our environments and we are forgetting about what version we were using. Because if I give example of ChatGPT itself or Gemini or any other AI technology, they had issues in their first versions or initial versions, and then they keep updating it. I think
Right.
everything needs an update. So make sure your AI versions or not AI, sorry, LLMs,
Yes.
be very specific, large language models are up
LLM.
to date. I
Correct.
don't say anything which is not right. So LLM versions, they need to be up to date. Now, when you're
Hmm.
using LLM, you talked very rightly about data poisoning. So
Okay.
the data that goes into it, because we're training the system. If you're not training the system right, it will not give you the right results. So the
Exactly.
right results will only be there when you give the right data. If you poison the data, if you keep feeding the poison data or wrong data or not so right data or the data which might not give you the right results or analysis, how will you expect something right to be given? So
Correct.
data poisoning. And then uh, for LLM systems, if I give an example, they need to be validated too. How? I remember a few days back, a case came where I was reading it. So it's there on the internet where Chevrolet had introduced a bot which was
Okay.
actually negotiating the amount for the cars. So
Okay.
somebody played around with the LLM models and brought down the price to $1. So if I'm
Okay.
buying a car and a $1, how cool that would be. Like I'll be the happiest. I want
Right.
like whole cars, the list of cars in front of my house. So I think when we are using these systems, we need to validate it. Nobody to be blamed for, but then everything needs to be validated. Whether
Hmm.
it's for the cloud environment, it's for a tool, or it's for anything. So validation is the key, and then the limiting, who will have access to what data, who will
Okay.
provide the data, how the data would be accessed. I think these
Okay.
are some mechanisms, but yes, you can actually take a look at the top 10 list of vulnerable LLM issues, and that can really help. We can go on and on for LLM risks because they are
Right.
talk of the town, and then everybody is speaking about some other thing, LLM in supply chain security, LLM in DevSecOps, this and that. So yeah, it's something which is picking up big time now.
That's true, very true. But this is very much important. Why? Because in this scenario, we do not have a human mind involved in this who has ability to question. What we have read about AI is that AI know how to do things, but you don't
Right.
know why it's happening. And
Yeah.
why question comes by human interactions. And I
Hmm.
think the limitation of human interaction or getting trained all the courses or all the things which we usually do in these type of tasks in DevSecOps or in any of the courses or in any other technology, more dependency on AI will only let them to do how, but not to just categorize why. So I think it's much important that we keep us real time updated for with the technology as well as its implementation in a right approach. That's interesting.
That's right.
That's a wrap from our end. If Vandana, would you love to add any last few points? You can just let us, our viewer, know something from your end, and then we can just do a submission of this.
So I would say that we need to stop viewing security as a checkpoint and start seeing it as a collaborative journey. Very,
Mhm.
very important that the most successful teams I've worked with have security engineers sitting with developers, understanding their challenges and building solutions together. So, first and the most important thing is communication.
Okay. That's interesting. So, what keywords I'm going to take with this discussion with Vandana was, do report things, whatever you see, keep yourself updated, your logs and everything. If you see anything happening wrong, say sorry and move ahead and get the things sorted up instead of taking the things longer to the time. Implementation of AI is something which you shared is going to be happen day by day. Better is that you focus on more updated LLM models instead of the old LLM models, because then you will be ahead of getting attached by vulnerabilities. And all other pointers which he has explained. This conversation usually reminds me that great security isn't about the perfect tool. It's about building right mindset, process, and culture. That's what she actually made us to believe. And we give a very thankful words to her. I mean, Vandana, huge thanks for bringing this so generous and wonderful time for all of our viewers with lots of knowledge which you have given to us. And we're very happy that we got your time to let our viewers and learn a lot of things. Thank you very much for making this session insightful. To all our viewers, until next time, stay cautious, stay secure, and keep pushing to those security boundaries to align your learnings and your new journey of making things right in the directions of cybersecurity. That's interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.